Welcome to Conscious Insights, Strategies for Leadership Evolution. Engage in roundtable discussions that spark deep dialogue with executives and thought leaders to advance conscious leadership and explore innovative practices. Join us and gain insights that will elevate your leadership journey. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Conscious Insights. And this season, I've been talking a lot about the different methods of shift and how, the inner work of leaders and the systems. And I want to talk today. I have a really special guest to talk about what it means to design upstream and why that is so important. And just I want to introduce Johnna Flood, who really just embodies everything that we're talking about and is creating the system shift in that way. So let me tell you a little bit about Johnna, and then we'll hop right in. Johnna Flood is a seasoned entrepreneur, community designer, and social impact leader with more than 20 years of experience guiding collaborative systems change. She's led cross-sector initiatives with nonprofits, government agencies, and community members, leveraging expertise in human-centered design. Jonna authored the first academic article on collective impact, has spoken nationally on its implementation, and she co-designed, is it GMA Village?
Yeah.
An award-winning childcare model that strengthened economic opportunity for low-income families and grandmothers in Oakland, California. And so as co-founder and the CEO of Elevated Denver, she draws on this depth of experience to unite lived experts and partners in creating equitable systemic solutions to homelessness. Jonna, welcome so much to our dialogue today. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jonna, the first time that we met, I think a mutual colleague and friend of ours, one of your board members, just said, like, we had to meet. But she's like, you guys just have to meet. And so usually there was no real explanation, but I trust in that when I hear that. And so we all got together, and then I understood what she meant when she said, you just have to meet. And so I'd love to, we talk about we want these different outcomes downstream, but it's really about how we do things upstream that shifts things. And so if you could just talk a little bit about what Elevated Denver is, what you're doing, and why, just kind of get into that a little bit more about why that's so important.
Okay, that's a big question. I'll have a lot to say about that because first, what I want to say is when we think about any challenge that we're facing as a society, like homelessness, but really it could be a number of challenges, usually there's an embedded system that is associated with that challenge. And housing and homelessness is probably one of the largest besides healthcare systems that we have. And when you look at that, it can feel really daunting to create change and to do something different. So often what we do is more of the same, something that's comfortable, something that feels tangible. And in the case of homelessness, that is a lot of individualized services, something we might call downstream when you're talking about how you serve the individual. And those are very important. I can't overstate that. It's really critical that we serve individuals in that way.
Right.
But the spirit of our work and why I was part of founding Elevated Denver was really to take a different lens on the issue of homelessness and say, is there a way we can approach this challenge, looking at the system and saying, how can we support folks and support the system to work for folks before they even experience homelessness or when they first experience homelessness so that we can actually provide a safety net. So I'm going to dig into a few things, but maybe if it's okay, I'll start with the origin story, a little of Elevated Denver, because that kind of helps ground.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah. And then we might want to help people see why the current approach to homelessness, wasn't or isn't as effective and how, we've got a lot to explore. So absolutely. Yeah. Let's start there.
Okay, great. And you just take me where we want to go. So, you read my bio, and you can see in my history that a lot of my work experience has been really centered around community-based research, collective impact, how do we come together and solve problems, and human-centered design, how do we center community and really drive new solutions and be very actionable about that. So, Elevated Denver is in essence all of those things, but I didn't know Elevated Denver was going to come to fruition. What happened was in 2020, when COVID hit, our community, like many across the United States and beyond, hit a massive crisis, crescendo of homelessness. And I just felt like, could I apply my skills and knowledge to do something about this? I never presume that I know the answer to that question. What I do know how to do is go learn and understand what's happening. So that was our first approach. We didn't know Elevated Denver was even going to be a podcast or anything else until we went out and started talking to folks. We talked to folks who were in government, nonprofits, doing outreach, folks on the street, folks who had been on the street. And we really were just asking the question of how did we get here? What's happening? Where are we headed? And through that process, not only did I feel like I got a world-class education in the issue of homelessness, but I also felt that I could clearly identify three things that were missing in our ecosystem. One, I felt like people were running very hard to provide supports and services, but there was not space to truly collaborate across agencies, entities within the nonprofit sector and beyond, which is very important. Um, because everyone was running so hard, there was no one positioned to kind of take a 30,000-foot view of the system and see how it was functioning together. And then third and most important to my heart is where are the folks with lived experience in guiding what's needed, what's working, what's not. And so that's why we created Elevated Denver to really address those things. And inherent in that is creating a depth of understanding from the lens of the people who use the system about, again, how is it functioning, what's working, what's not, what's needed, and then creating pathways for them to actually drive those solutions.
Talking to the people that you're starting and talking to people themselves that are unhoused, homeless. I would imagine it's all different type of people. It's single individuals, families, children. Like, is that what you
Yes.
mean by talking to is that what you mean by talking to people that are closest to it?
Yes. Thanks for clarifying. People closest to it, those folks who have, yes, currently unhoused, have been unhoused, have had to navigate trying to get housing, to get support services. And so what that means is very practical. You're right. There's many faces, ages, experiences, and cultures of homelessness. So sometimes that's um, an immigrant family with young children. Sometimes that has been single adults, males, females, youth. Um, there's many different faces, but yes, that's who we spoke to ground our understanding.
Right there, yeah. And just a couple things, and we'll keep going with the story, but there's a couple things that are bringing me back to some of the frameworks that I put frameworks in quotes because I'm like, they are frameworks because they help us frame our thinking. But there's a couple things from earlier podcasts this year. And one is you talked about the ecosystem. And so we have to talk about the four quadrants of change, some of Ken Wilber's work, where we've got to look at change in all these different areas. It's not just in quadrant 4, which is the external system. Like you're really going into the felt experience, the individual experience, the behaviors. And so you're looking, when you say ecosystem, that makes me think of that. The other thing that I don't want to miss is the emergence.
Mhm.
This wasn't something that just there was this clear box and you were like, I'm going to go do this. This was something. And so I had a session, a podcast with Forrest Wilson, and we talked about what emergence is. And what you said, I don't want to gloss over that it emerged from something that you saw when
Yeah,
COVID came, which has created more openings and lenses than I think we're really giving credit for what that time has done for us. So
great.
yeah, is there a little, how does that land when I bring that up into some of the story?
I think that's so spot on and aligned. This really did, everything about our work did emerge as we witnessed, as we learned, as we sat with what was happening in our community, the stories that we were hearing. And it's really just been a path of following that. And something else you mentioned, and sort of the quadrants of change. While I'd like to talk a lot about systems change, and that's really important, and we'll get more into how we do that.
Yeah.
One thing I really feel to be true, Renelle, is that the core of any change has to be a shift in mindsets. And that requires us to shift. Sometimes it requires us to shift our belief structures. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the most challenging thing to shift. In fact, systems seem daunting to most people. I argue that those are way easier to shift than mindsets and belief structures. But
I totally
that,
agree.
thank you. Yes. But I also strongly believe that we will never solve problems like homelessness until we have a collective shift in our mindset and beliefs that people deserve to have support. People deserve to get what they need when they need it and have their basic needs met, and that we all deserve dignity, which in my definition is a belief that every person's life is valuable and worth living. And so part of our work always has to be about that. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to see the change that we want to see, even at this hyper local level. So storytelling is the origin, as I shared with you about our work, and it has sustained as a core element of everything we do, because stories, and now we bring art into that too as a pathway to share stories. That is how we connect. That is how we're able to see a different lens. That's how we start to challenge our own internal belief structures and say, wait a minute, what if the news reinforced that homelessness was always a direct cause of substance use and mental health challenges? But now I'm seeing these stories and hearing from a different lens. And what if I can open myself to the possibility that many of these folks experienced a loss of a loved one and didn't have a network of people to hold them up, and they were crushed by it. And that began the cascade of what is now looks like homelessness that you see on the street. What
Jonna, let
if,
me ask you
yeah,
a question. Who are we trying to, whose minds and hearts and belief structures, um, where, where are we looking to shift that? Where are you looking to shift that?
although I'm an idealist, I also have tinges of realism. I know that that's not gonna happen with everybody.
Yeah.
That's an impossible dream. So what I like to say is it's the compassionate middle. So, where are people hold a spot in their heart for compassion, but they haven't had access to these stories? They haven't had access to information that allows them to think about, feel, see from a different lens. Those are the folks that we basically try to bring our work to the most, because there are many folks who are um, already open. They're working in the field. They themselves have had experiences that allow them to really connect deeply with these different stories. I really want to actively bring in folks who maybe feel a little closed off, a little frustrated that this problem has gone on for so long and we haven't made progress.
Do you mean
But
like business leaders and political leaders and nonprofit leaders and communities? Like, who do you want to bring in? Or
all of the above. I think I will say I think that, as you mentioned, business leaders, um, people in political positions, in those two groups in particular, tend to be furthest from the problem. And as we know, everybody is running, and we all have our own streams of information, and it can be limited. And so we really want to be more expansive there. And I think the possibility for folks to open their hearts and minds to a different path, a different perspective, they're there. But we need to create a pathway for that so people really can have a connection.
mhm. And then what does that connection do? let's just say I didn't have a connection to this, and I thought it was the first thing that you said of just people just are not pulling themselves up, but they're being victims. I mean, that's why we have, let's just say I thought that, which I don't, and you have just shown me some stories from people with this lived experience of what happened, and all of a sudden there's a pathway for me. What then?
What then? You might, on your, way to the grocery store, you might see someone who is on the street corner. You might look at them and think, I wonder what their story is. You might smile at them. You might have a sense of humanity. This person is a human having a very human experience. Just that, you being willing to look someone in the eye the next time you see them and hold space for the possibility that they're not trying to be extractive in this world, but just trying to survive after having rough circumstances. That energy shift in the universe is very important. On a larger scale, it might inspire you to get involved somehow. It might inspire you to, if you're a business owner, it might inspire you to think, we've talked to many people who work for companies and they fall on a hard time. They don't want to share that. They feel a lot of shame. So they stop showing up to work because they're dealing with something, and they lose their job and they lose their housing. Maybe after you hear some of these stories, you're an employer who notices someone hasn't shown up to work or is late and kind of seems off their game. Maybe instead of coming down on them and penalizing them, you say, hey, can we check in? What's going on with you? And be open to the possibility that they might be stumbling a little bit, and maybe you have support or can allow them some grace or some time to get back on their feet. The possibilities for what it could open up are endless, and they're as small, as I said, as looking at someone and just smiling at them, looking them in their eye, to big, getting involved, creating possibilities, creating friendships or relationships with a neighbor you would have never talked to before.
Yeah. I saw a really brilliant story recently, and it was a story of this was more about childcare, but it was a business leader that did not have children, and so didn't really understand the world of childcare. But then they showed all the different ways in which early child care access actually helped his business and his people, and actually lifted up the revenue of his business because of access to that. My sense is that's the same. There's something similar. Let's change the persona to, I'm the CEO of a major for-profit organization. And I have a heart for this, but I don't really see the connection to my business. I'm sensing you might be able to help me find that connection.
Absolutely. When someone experiences homelessness, it affects all of us, whether we know it or not. And that is absolutely true of a business. There is an economic pull that occurs, and it could be employee. We have a crisis of homelessness in Denver. That just, when it was very present downtown, people didn't want to go to work. Maybe they didn't feel safe. Maybe people didn't want to move to Denver to be employed here. Maybe there's some loss of talent. The pull on the entire system. Well, here I am. I'm going to say these numbers. These are not exact numbers, but there are some folks doing studies right now about the difference between having to support someone who is chronically unhoused and the annual cost of that compared to preventing them from losing housing. And the estimates at the bare minimum it's 1/3 of the cost. And that's the highest. The biggest differential is it's, 1/10 or more of the cost to just prevent a one-time cost versus an annual cost. Well, that pulls on the whole system, all of the individuals in the system. And there's something to be said too about the sort of mental and emotional tax that occurs when you feel like this pressing suffering in your community that your employees are witnessing, that they feel they might be closer to than you know. That's another thing that has been very illuminating for me as I've gone about this work. There are a lot of people who have experienced homelessness. 40% of our unhoused population are working, not necessarily in the big businesses, but I guarantee you every one of us would be surprised when you meet some of these folks. You would never guess that they're really experiencing rough times. And these folks are everywhere.
Yeah, and they're in our, in our community, the parents, as a parent, like parents that I'm sitting with or dropping kids off, they are businesses that I rely on, for food, for, I don't know, for gas, like, all the different things that I might rely on. And they're like in my community, to your point. There's this both and of this sense of like, we are all connected, and I have a responsibility to, to myself, to my children, to the next generation, and to those around me, to bring, to lift us all up. And then, and economically, it's really good for all of us as well. And so that's all these
Absolutely.
different quadrants, right?
Couldn't agree
And we
more.
don't see it every day. And I think what you're trying to do, a couple things that I love that you're doing, and I want to know more about the how, is that you're trying to bring this, bigger picture to more people. And you're doing it in a way that I believe could be done in other areas, like, whether it's other social service areas and even in business, business transformation. Maybe we could even do AI differently using this approach. But,
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit more about your collaboratories and how you're taking this from our hearts, shifting our hearts and our minds, and showing us more stories and about your collaboratories.
Great. I love that. Yes, because as I mentioned, part of our work is always about the storytelling and shifting hearts and minds, but we need to practically shift the system too. And one thing about systems change is that even if you're someone who believes it's necessary and desires it, it is daunting. And also, change is scary for most humans. And so it's really important to sort of break it down in what is tangible, what's feasible. And so what we do is through the data collection I told you, we spoke to so many folks and we understood their journeys through the system. We actually, through our qualitative data analysis, clearly identified 6 breakdowns in our system here in Denver. Since that time, to your point, I have brought that to many audiences around the country, and they resonate. Those breakdowns are very familiar in different areas. And what we do is we say, okay, great. This just gives us our map to what needs to shift. And so we take one breakdown by breakdown and we bring people together in collaboratories. And so that collaboratories, as you mentioned, sometimes it's very helpful to have a framework that helps us understand how we're going to create that change. The collaboratories are a framework for digging really deep on one specific problem and then collectively solving for that problem. And to do that, we bring 10 to 12 individuals together across business, nonprofit, government, and we co-lead these with people with lived experience who are stable, they're leaders, they're ready to activate their lived experience to inform this change. And we do what's essentially a design sprint. We use practices businesses use every day, and we apply them with a little twist there, because what's really important in these spaces is everyone has power in the space. There is no, a lot of times the folks that we engage in the business world are used to holding a lot of power in spaces. And we say, you're going to have to step back in this. And we elevate the lived experience in that room because they know this system the best. And we run through usually a 6-session design sprint where we go very deep on the problem. We get way more information. We do immersive exercises so the folks who are not close to that problem have the experience of being close to that problem.
Embodied
And
it.
they
Feel it.
embody it. Exactly. And then we move towards, expansive possibilities, and we refine and we test. So can I give an example of our first
Yes.
collaboratory?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the summer of 2024, we convened our first collaboratory, and we said the very first systemic breakdown we understood from our research was that before someone experienced homelessness, they often experienced a loss of a job, a loved one, a health event, or something else that triggered a crisis. And they did not, importantly, the folks we talked to did not have the network to hold them up, the familial or social network they could lean on in those challenging times. And what we learned is they didn't know that there was any other kind of support available. So they kind of were in crisis, just trying to survive the crisis, and eventually lost their housing and ended up on the street. And once they were on the street, it took them 3 to 6 months to get any resource beyond immediate shelter and food. Well, any one of us could imagine what that might feel like to be in the elements, to be on the cement, to potentially feel unsafe, especially if you're a woman, and what you would do. And it triggers a whole cascade of other issues. So we said, listen, what if we could find people before they lose their housing, while they still have some stability, but they're going through a crisis or having some challenges? What if we could meet them there? What would that look like, and what would we do? So that's the question we brought to this first collaboratory. We had 10 folks, again, cross-sector, lived experts. And we went really deep on that. And how do people find information now? What do they do? Where do they leverage? What happens when they enter the system? How do they find information? And this group came up with 2 potential solutions that we prototyped and took out into the community. One, I think the audience will not be surprised to hear, was highly digital. Hey, could we use AI or something else to help us connect with folks and get them connected to resources? Is there an app? Is there something like that? And the other was a highly personalized human-to-human approach. And we tested both. And it was just a mock-up. We literally prototyped these things, did a mock-up, and brought it to a number of folks in the community, some currently experiencing homelessness, some who had now gained stability but were not long out of the system. And I'll tell you, folks, okay, I kind of know what I need, so the digital interface is working. But when they came out of this mock-up space where someone met them where they were and asked them, hey, I've been through it too. What's going on with you? How can I help you? What do you need support with? People left this room in tears. One woman said, that was the life preserver I never knew I needed. I have, in 5 years of navigating the system, no one has ever sat with me and truly asked me how I was doing, and I never felt cared for. Okay, we had our solution, and we needed to test it. And we have now, for the past year, we've been running what we call our Community Resource Connection Hub, where we do just that. We have 2 people, it's in a community center, 2 people from the community who have lived experience are there. People can call, email, text, come in, and it's, what's going on? And it might be, I really want to have a different future for myself, and I need to get out of my house. How do I get into college? What do I do?
Yeah.
It might be my landlord changed to an electronic system and I don't speak English well, and I'm an older adult and I do not navigate technology, and I'm behind on rent and he's threatening to kick me out. I have the money and I don't know what to do. And it could be I need rental assistance, but
Yeah.
it's human.
Let me, before we go, I want to reflect, going back to the very beginning, I just want to reflect a few things back that I heard.
Yeah.
The first thing I heard when you talked about the collaboratories, and you have a cross sector of people, and then maybe some people that are very powerful, used to being in a hierarchy that's very powerful, and you're asking for an adjustment, what I would call, there's an element of power over in many of our hierarchical systems, and you're asking them not to give up their power. I believe you're asking them, the words I would use is to share power, is
Yes.
power with. And in my world, we call that creative and integral leadership of, we don't want you to give up power. We want you to share it. We want you to use it in a different way. And then the other thing that you said that really that I really felt is, yes, technology has a place, but it's not even necessarily that you're going to take me out of the circumstances and fix it for me. It's that you see me, you feel me, and you co-regulate and witness with me. And that
Mm,
right there, what I believe that does, and in my work, we call this, and 70% of leaders are operating this way, a reactive leadership. And so our system is so over capacity that that we don't have the capacity to really regulate. And so then our actions, they might be, in the case of people that are really just had that triggering life event, they just can't process what to do next and where the
yeah.
help might be, because their system, and we see this in the workplace with leaders too, of, they've had no rest, and they have an old story about, we have to keep going, keep going, keep going. And then it shows up in, completely pushing people and themselves to an edge. And when we get people to this more regulated place, then change is possible.
Yes,
And so here we
exactly.
are talking about an everyday, an everyday occurrence in organizations that exactly mimics what is happening, to someone who is on the edge of being unhoused or homelessness. And so we can help both ways, right?
Yeah.
So this leader coming in, perhaps to sit and be in a collaboratory with someone with this lived experience, in essence, can shift something they need to shift as well as they're helping another person. I think reciprocity is a good word for that.
Oh, I think you've just really tied the threads so beautifully, and you've really got it. It is about shared power. Power is not finite. There is space for everyone to hold it. And we have to create a space where we can hold it, if not equally, equitably. And I do believe two other things you said really stand out to me. The reciprocity, absolutely. And I think there's a beautiful story from our first collaboratory about an individual who came from a business lens. I, in my intuition, knew he'd be great in the space. He agreed to it because I was pushing hard for him to be there, and he said, "Okay, fine, Jonna, I'll do it." Um, and it really shifted his perspective, and now he's in friendship and relationship and collegial relationships with everybody in that room, including the people with lived experience, and has a totally different lens on what that means and the value of lived experience. And that is a mutual relationship. It's beautiful. The other thing that I think is really wise that you mentioned, this type of a crisis, whatever might trigger it, and whatever the result, and us operating from a space of crisis, of trauma, of reactivity. This is not an experience that is unique to someone who about to experience homelessness or is having this. It is not unique at all. Some of us have more resources or in different contexts. But what happens, as you pointed out, is when we're in those spaces, we start to shut down. We go to a primitive self. And what we really need to hold space for is us all having expansiveness. And I think that I think a lot about this. As I told you, we don't just use social work principles to do what we do. We use a lot of business principles.
Yeah.
And there's a marriage there of how you bring those together with concepts like how do you share power and how do you do this work of listening and changing social systems. It all comes back to core principles. And I would say for a leader of a corporation, what happens when you listen to the people on the front lines? We know this from manufacturing, everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
If you create space for the people who are closest to the customers, closest to the product, closest to the manufacturing, to have voice and agency, and you take time and space for that, the possibilities are endless. And often businesses thrive when they do that, right? So there's a lot of synergy. And I think that what we're doing, you had mentioned a little earlier, there's applicability beyond Denver, beyond homelessness. And I could not agree more. What we're really trying to do, yes, we're working on homelessness, and we're trying to build and test and refine a model for how we collectively um, design change to anything.
Yeah. Yes. And it has all of these elements, right? It has the whole human, it has intuition, it has yes, we use our brain, but it has our heart, our gut, emergence. Like you're mentioning so many parts that I feel, and these different ways of knowing that especially as this world becomes more and more complex, we have got to have access to those, and we
Yeah.
have to have access to those as individuals, as leaders, and then that's what's going to start to shift. I might even dare say, create and author new systems.
Yes.
Is it systems we need to fix, or is it new systems we need to
Mm,
create? And I feel like that's the other thing that your approach makes possible, because it has this expansive view of, we might hold a hypothesis, but we're also going to let what we learn inform where we go. And then we're going to experiment with that. And I think that is so key in the social change that we need to make, and in the bigger change that's really being asked of us, asked of
I
all of us.
I couldn't agree more. And I will tell you, you're absolutely right. I think that we have to. It's fine to hold hypotheses, and we have to hold space for what's possible, and hold space and vision for what we haven't seen yet. And that is challenged in every environment that most of us are in. And, we've felt it personally too, because the funding structures and the partnership structures and some of the things that exist, um, they're not designed to hold that space. And so we really have decided, as Elevated Denver, that we cannot waver from that. Somebody has to hold that. If no one holds what's possible, what can be, we will never shift out of what is. And frankly, Renelle, what is isn't working.
Right. It's not working, and we know it. And just trying to fix it isn't really what's being asked of us. I really deeply in my heart really see and believe that we're being asked to author a new way forward. And I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing. And I'm so thankful that you could come on and share this story, because it brings together all these different things that we talk about. And we do, technically, you would say we do different work. If people saw us, like say our profiles on LinkedIn, but hopefully as people are listening to us together, we don't do different work at all.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We do the exact same work. And there's more of us that are doing this work with different expressions, and we must be doing these similar things with different expressions. And so, Jonna, where can people find you? And I, of course, put it in the show notes, but just a little bit more about Elevated Denver. I think we can find you on a website, but I think do you guys still have your podcast?
We have our podcast, also called Elevated Denver, accessible on all the platforms. We haven't done many episodes lately, but we have a rich bank of stories and information that continue to be relevant to this day. And every now and then we add to it, and there could be some in the near future. We are also on social media and LinkedIn, elevateddenver.co for the Colorado. And that's the same for our website, elevateddenver.co. And always people are welcome to reach out. the core value of our work is collaboration and shared learning. And if we, as you said, there are many of us that are having different applications, but are operating in the same spirit of what our work is. And we must continue to connect, to collaborate, to amplify each other, to share what we're learning and what doesn't work too. That's very important. And so please, I always welcome anyone to reach out and connect anytime.
Awesome. Well, Jonna, thank you so much for joining me today. My heart is open and inspired, and I hope for all of our listeners and viewers that not only that this maybe inspires you a little bit, but that reach out to one of us and really start to author and be part of authoring this new way forward.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. For more information, visit insight-cc.com or email us at info@insight-cc.com. We look forward to hearing from you.